DCEU is dead. But you know what's not dead? This channel.
What's up? What's up?
Hi everyone and welcome to John Dudley Speaks, where I'll be going over a myriad of topics on camera. I'm your host, John Dudley, because who else would it be? The Snyderverse, more commonly known as DC's poor answer to the wildly popular Marvel Cinematic Universe, was kickstarted a little over 10 years ago, and just ended this past holiday season with the release of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. More like Last Kingdom, am I right? Am I right? Though we will all miss these tonally dissonant, inconsistently paced, oddly morbid, and cheerfully empty films quite dearly, I think it's high time we give them the proper farewell they deserve, analytically nitpicking every last detail. That's right folks, I'll be diving into each movie in the following areas: story, visuals, action, characters, vibe, and box office. And then to top it all off, I'll give it a final rating of a hit, a miss, or somewhere in between. Y'all ready? Let's do this. First up, the first son of Krypton and the first son of Martha.
Why did you say that name?
It's Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. Now, I don't fault the people that love this movie. I think it's one of the better entries of the DCEU and one of Zack Snyder's best films, but as a response to Marvel's first phase, which concluded the previous year with the Avengers, this is a puzzling start to the connected universe, and it only gets more complicated from here. Not to mention, it's a little hard to take everyone seriously when half the words that they're saying is Codex.
The Codex is not here.
I have located the Codex. Does Kal-El need to be alive for us to extract the Codex from his cells?
Surrender the Codex.
Henry Cavill is our Clark Kent / Superman, and he's about to take heroism to a whole new level. You see this guy that's messing with this girl in this bar? This is his truck now. Honestly, anyone who harasses women like this definitely deserves this kind of treatment, so good on you, Zach. You're getting me excited about how women are going to be portrayed in this movie. I mean, surely the women won't be written with flat perspectives that are mainly used as motivations for the male main characters. Surely that won't happen, right? There's also Waterworld's own Kevin Costner as Jonathan Kent, who gets a lot of the emotional beats of this movie, and when he's not getting sucked up into a tornado, he's laying down the hard stuff, the life lessons, if you will, about sacrificing other people's lives so that you can remain special? I don't know, is that it?
Maybe.
Admittedly, out of the gate, I think the tone and cadence of Man of Steel is really strong. Usually Snyder's story mechanics are fairly warbled and backwards in their execution, but David S. Goyer and Christopher Nolan's story, yes, this Christopher Nolan, offsets a lot of his directorial hiccups and indulgences, which is something you probably couldn't do nowadays, considering this is what his post-DC work looks like. Oh good, he's done? I thought he was gonna. Oh my god! One of the core components that makes this movie controversial is not only its inimitable style that favors a visual feast over telling a coherent story through images, but Snyder's take on the Superman tale, while ambitious, is deeply misguided.
It's not an S.
Huh?
On my world, it means hope.
What? On top of that, the conflict and mythos at the center of the Superman story are not about Clark's battle within or Clark's double life, but whether or not Clark should save people? I don't know, it's oddly individualistic and hauntingly utilitarian for a Superman story, but it kind of makes sense when you realize it was directed by the guy whose favorite book is The Fountainhead. I will say, there is no shortage of badass moments across this entire thing, like this.
A good death is its own reward.
Or like this. And my personal favorite, this. God, some of the images here are just so nostalgic and breathtaking that it boggles your mind that DC completely fucked it up from here on out. But you're probably wondering, what's my take? What's John think about all of this? Is it bussin'? I heard that. I'm not proud of it. I'm sorry for all the damage I'm caused. The basic story structure can be a little unbalanced in this movie, and Snyder's direction doesn't make the plot points all that evident to the viewer, but luckily Snyder's not on the script, so it doesn't really make a difference until this. The sketch-like approach to these frames is very aesthetically pleasing, and Snyder has such a beautiful eye for inventive, engaging, painting-like set pieces that are enormously better than most comic book movies nowadays. Like, if this movie was made today, it would generally look like shit. The CG would be god-awful, and the characters would look like PS3 renders, and Ezra Miller would do this, and it would look a little embarrassing, and I'm getting ahead of myself and talking about The Flash. Okay, I'll stop. Ow. The amount of whiplash the 3D of this movie caused me made me not want to see a 3D movie for a long time, and I didn't see one until Avatar: The Way of Water, like years later, and that was so much more effective. Like, I love the visuals here and how Snyder uses them, but good lord, the breakneck speed and chaotic action can be a little overbearing. It's impressive, but honestly, it feels like the closest equivalent to an author over-explaining their plot points to death, or Eminem over-explaining the quadruple entendre they just laid us at the very same line. It just comes off as overkill when we're not really getting a sense of what this damage is doing to these characters, and it feels just a little unsettling that way. But I will say, this is pretty awesome. I can't say that I entirely disliked anything about the characters. That's mainly because there's really not much written here for us to know about them. The Superman interpretation doesn't annoy me as much as it does other fans, and it's not like the major tenets aren't touched upon. It's just done in an awkward way that misses the thematic appeal of the comic, and it ends up doing this. Last but not least, the murky world and aesthetic that Snyder created with this movie is honestly very singular for comic book films, and is probably the closest that anything has ever touched the Dark Knight trilogy in terms of world building. I found myself very immersed in the overall atmosphere, and the strong sense of lived-in locations made Metropolis feel of the time in 2013. But after the last decade, the downcast gray-blue aesthetic really pops in a neo-noir way that I feel like most visual filmmakers would struggle to nail down for a current-day blockbuster, unless you're Matt Reeves, of course. You see, Matt Reeves and Zack Snyder can do slow-mo noir pretty well, but only Matt Reeves can do this. But then again, it's not like we didn't get a villain whose weird tick is shrieking.
I will find him!
Overall, this one is a hit. Man of Steel is a solid start to the DCEU. Hopefully DC doesn't get overzealous and speedrun a Batman appearance in the sequel to kickstart the Justice League via email. No, that's exactly what they did. Yep, it's not looking good from here. Up next is Zack Snyder's Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice.
Do you bleed? You will.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like, your opinion, man.
Generally, I dislike this movie quite a bit. I know, Ben Affleck is the best Batman. No, he's not. In order to be the best Batman, you have to have the best writing. And this script is literally straight garbage. Petition for Chris Terrio to give back his Oscar for Argo? Anyone want to sign that with me?
Go fuck yourself.
Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice is a movie that lives up to its title in that it promises a lot, but if you take one look at its surface, you can kind of tell how irritating and clunky it's going to be. And as much as I want to say the 3-hour R-rated Ultimate Edition is better, it truly isn't. It adds context to the bad stuff, but the bad stuff is still bad. It's like if you put whipped cream on expired pie. The whipped cream's gonna taste good, there's no doubt, but like the pie's still gonna taste like shit. Or in Jesse Eisenberg's case, piss. You'd think with Ben Affleck being cast as the 50-year-old Batman straight out of The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller would mean that we could skip the origin this time. But no, don't let that fool you, because rest assured, Zack Snyder's gonna make sure you're seeing the pearls. Also, are we gonna ignore that Bruce Wayne's dad is being played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan and he's not being allowed to say anything the whole time?
Oh, you better be joking.
The entire conceit of this movie is that, here we go, that Batman hates Superman because his best friend Jack, Oh, sweet Jack died when Superman was up in the air, kicking ass, saving the world. So naturally, it's now Batman's duty to protect the world from Superman, until they find out their moms have the same name.
Save Martha!
Batman drops literally every bit of character development because of this. It's insane. But it did lead to... You know what? Who cares about Batman's one rule of killing, you know? Definitely Zack Snyder, doesn't care about it. And you know what? I don't care about it either. Let him have his fun. But you didn't come for the nitpicks. You didn't come for my complaints about plot. You didn't come for Lex Luthor's convoluted, nonsensical plan. And you didn't come for a flat romance between an uninterested Amy Adams and a bored to tears Henry Cavill. You came for the title. That's right, all 8 minutes of it. And it's pretty good. Batman's CrossFit routine seems to be working out for him. If this was all the movie was, I'd be so much more invested, but Warner Brothers must have looked at this script and said, you know what? It's bad. Let's make it worse. Taking this could have been an email quite literally, we get the Justice League in desktop form, and oh my god, this kind of sucks. But at least we're blessed with this. Great theme, Hans Zimmer. I wonder how they're going to abuse it over the course of the next several years. They couldn't possibly use it during a child's funeral? But if you thought that was poor world building, I need you to buckle up for the nightmare. We got parademons, we got evil Superman, we got Batman looking at an Omega symbol. We got literally everything that could and should confuse regular viewers, and I had no idea what was going on, and I am immersed in this shit. Plus, if your grandfather wasn't already confused, here's something else. What? Huh? Wait. Was that the guy from the email? It's fucking wild to me how this was greenlit and put into a major blockbuster film. Knowing that there's no payoff, too, it just makes it so much worse. And you can't tell me that the Snyder Cut pays it off, because it really doesn't. Why did they make this so hard? Why? We could have just had a Batman movie. We could have just had a Batman movie. Look at this man. Oh, and spoiler alert, Superman dies. But I really didn't want to cover that all too much because you kind of feel nothing, and I'm not going to even talk about it because we all know what's going to happen. It's just so poorly executed because, Snyder doesn't spend enough time on these characters to get us invested, so by the time it's over, it feels like we just watched this for homework. It's pretty disappointing. At least with Man of Steel, we had a coherent story in the bones of a plot structure, but with Batman vs. Superman, Snyder exacerbates the problems of the script by only scratching the surface of its themes, making it come off a lot more stilted and pretentious in its messaging. And how exactly do you come back from this bullshit?
Martha won't die tonight.
The brightest spots of this movie, as always with Zack Snyder's films, are of course the visuals, which genuinely feel like an improvement over Man of Steel, the darker tones flourishing in contrast to the short bursts of incandescence and otherworldly, almost mythical looking frames. Zack's had better visuals since this point of his career, and though I like a lot of Rebel Moon's comic panel-like shots, Batman vs. Superman doesn't feel as vibe heavy as Snyder's later work, so I think this goes over a lot better here. I find it very impressive in how Zack Snyder stages fight scenes, but good god, this Doomsday fight is in particular very awful. The geography of this final action scene is just not great, especially compared to the Batman vs. Superman brawl and Batfleck's warehouse scene, as well as his Batmobile scene. Practically Batman carries most of this movie's action, and that's not good when Superman comes off as nothing more than a boring turd. Speaking of boring turds, almost everybody that isn't Batman is terrible in this movie. Whether they're sleepwalking in their roles or just bumbling around shoving candy into people's mouths. Snyder was clearly more interested in the Batman character. Why not just make a Batman movie? Like, Superman has literally nothing to do in this movie, and he just feels like a side character. It just feels like there's a lot of behind-the-scenes drama about how these characters should be developed and represented, and it all shows on the screen. All of the atmosphere that made Man of Steel feel quietly triumphant feels very vacuumed out of this movie, and the tonal shifts across it just make the atmosphere and the vibe just feel completely off right from the start. And I understand tonal changes in sequel as much as the next guy. I mean, The Empire Strikes Back upped the ante, The Godfather Part 2 went into an even darker place, even Deadpool 2 dug into more dense themes, but there should still be some retention of the lighter tones to complement the darker story, but really here the vibe just feels off right away, and it's made worse every time this guy enters the frame. I'm sad to say that this one is a miss, but if you thought this was bad, we've only reached the tip of the iceberg when it comes to bad.
It's my cross.
Oh yes, it's time for Suicide Squad.
What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
That's the name of the movie! David Ayer's Suicide Squad, and not the hashtag release the Ayer cut version, was released in 2016 after multiple trailers full of smash cuts, snappy edits, on-the-nose needle drops, cheesy dialogue, and a tease of our new in-universe Joker. And the movie we got ended up being full of smash cuts, snappy edits, on-the-nose needle drops, cheesy dialogue, and a tease of our new in-universe Joker. I find this to be barely a movie because the edit absolutely cuts it to pieces to make it look like a trailer, which makes sense considering the people that cut the trailer were hired by WB to edit the movie. Hold on, wait, I was just eating my pudding. Where is it? Where's my pudding?
I lost my pudding.
I remember being very excited for this movie and then very confused afterwards, partly because David Ayer had a really solid track record considering he was coming off of End of Watch and Fury, and I'm gonna pretend like Sabotage just never happened. Can we do that?
No. And fuck you for asking.
But what makes this movie just so unbelievably bad isn't just its ugly aesthetic, its thin characterizations.
This is Katana. She's got my back.
Nope, it's the objectionable approach to writing in this movie that just takes me out of it.
Would you die for me?
Yes.
That's too easy. Would you live for me?
You like me?
Yeah.
Do you love me?
And I know, I'm aware that every scene in this movie was like sawed to pieces, but at the core foundation of this script is a total non-starter of a story, which makes sense considering David Ayer was asked to revise the script 6 weeks before filming to take out Steppenwolf and replace him with Enchantress's brother. Honestly, that's way better than I could have done, so hats off to you, Dave. I'm just glad that he doesn't have to do this kind of stuff anymore. He can get back to just really working on focused movies, like The Beekeeper.
I'm a beekeeper. I protect the hive.
Beekeeper Hive, stand up! Welcome to the Statham Sidebar. This is a place where we get to freely talk about what we all love to talk about. How great Jason Statham is. Now you might mistake me for making fun of The Beekeeper, but au contraire. Jason Statham films are cinema. He kicks ass, he does his own stunts, he does well with the ladies, he's a friend of the bros, and you know what? He's really funny.
Here's what we do. I go into the face-off machine, get a whole new face.
Do you have quarters? Because it costs 50 cents.
We'll go pay.
Until next time, this is the Statham Sidebar. Okay, what the hell? It appears I let the intrusive thoughts win. Often when there's a movie that looks as ugly as Suicide Squad does and has such a comparatively shitty plot versus its two predecessors, we can look forward to the action sequences, but instead we just get a lot of walking? How about now? How about now? Cool, now we get to see Will Smith using his Deadshot guns!
I kept it hidden most of my life, but...
And now they're going to a bar?
I'm taking my kids to mom's.
You ain't taking my kids nowhere.
For more exposition? It's actually depressing how much this movie just doesn't work at all. Especially when you take a second to watch Viola Davis do her thing, it takes your mind off of how horrible this movie can be. Oh, and she's gone. But in to replace her in this jigsaw Frankenstein monster of an edit is the one, the only, the lead singer of 30 Seconds to Mars, who is known for nothing else, Jared Leto. I can't stress enough that even if this was the Ayer cut, Jared Leto's Joker does not work on any level. Just like everything in this movie, the Joker's arc is a complete and utter afterthought, so who better to match him than his counterpart, Batman, who I completely forgot was in this movie. Speaking of forgetting things, I completely forgot about how horrible this soundtrack was. Like, Heathens by 21 Pilots was already all over the radio stations at this time. You could not escape it, and the fact that it's in this movie along with a bunch of other terrible songs, it just makes this movie so much worse. On top of that, you don't need to have a movie wall to wall with songs unless you're James Gunn and you know how to do it with feeling and meaning that complements the humor and tone, and it kind of makes sense he ended up making a better Suicide Squad movie.
We fail the mission, you die.
We find out any information you give us is false, you die.
If we find out you have personalized license plates, you die.
What? No.
That's so much better. If you guys recall, and you probably don't because you probably only watched this movie once and that was good enough for you, the ending of this movie is a muddy CGI fest that's as sludgy and ugly as the rest of the movie, but what makes this part stand out is how the team finally learns to shed their demons and come together, becoming the anti-heroes they were destined to become, and they speedrun that character development in 3 minutes and 14 seconds. I'll admit though, Will Smith and Margot Robbie give really solid performances in this movie, and it kind of makes sense given their off-screen chemistry. Wonder what Jada has to say about that. Oh god, Will! One more thing, why does the DCU love slow-mo so much? Take the shot, take the shot! What are you doing? Are we sure Zack Snyder didn't direct this too?
No. And fuck you for asking.
You'd think that's where we end, but no. Puddin's back for more. So naturally, this guy is too.
You should shut it down. My friends and I will do it for you.
Seems like a nice little build-up to the team that Batman's pulling together. Would be a shame if it all falls apart and bombs miserably. It's bad. Bad. Bad, I tell you. Bad. Never have I seen a comic book movie look so unparalleled in how visually awful it is. Like, its dingy, yucky underbelly fits the characters, but I found the CG and the practical effects and the costume design and the makeup to be just so drab. No way it won an Oscar, right? I thought that maybe I changed something on my TV, like there's no possible way it looks like this, but no, it just looks like this. I didn't do anything at all.
I didn't do fucking shit!
Aside from some interesting shots here and there, the editing of this movie just really kills it. I mean, everyone talks about Taken 3 being the ultimate hack job in editing as of late, but take a look at this and tell me it's not the worst thing you've ever seen in a major studio film. Okay, Flag, Waller, and Harley are fine. They're enormously improved upon in James Gunn's film, but here they're competent enough as characters, but everyone else, including Will Smith's Deadshot, are given such flat arcs that fail to follow the basic tenets of the hero's journey, or should I say, the villain's journey?
Shut up!
Absolutely not. There's no vibe here. There's no vibe. It doesn't fit into the Batman vs. Superman aesthetic. It doesn't create its own thing. It's just a stitched up eyesore that has no sense of atmosphere because it doesn't spend enough time or do enough work to establish one. And this was pretty gross too. As inexplicable as its box office results are, this movie is a complete and utter miss. I'm hoping that WB looks back at this dumpster fire every so often and recognizes what happens when a studio tinkers with something so much that it ends up being nothing like what was intended. But hey, Marvel might be headed that direction very soon. Now that I've officially wasted more brain cells than I wanted to talking about this, I think it's time for me to turn off the camera and rethink my life a little bit before I have to endure this in part 2. What have I done? What have I done? Oh my god. There's so many of these movies. Why did I do this? Until then, my name is John Dudley. This is John Dudley Speaks, and I approve this message. I'm wearing a hat now. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you haven't already, that's totally fine. You got plenty of time to. It will make my day if you do like and subscribe, because I see those notifications. There's only like a few of them at a time now. But once this channel starts to grow, I want you to be up to speed with all the content that's coming, so please make sure you follow my podcast channel on Spotify. It's John Dudley Speaks the podcast, and hit jduds.substack.com for my newsletter. Okay, bye.